afternoon and welcome to CMC. From its beginning, CMC has welcomed everyone. I'm Kristen Easterday, Director of Communications and Public Affairs at the Columbus Regional Airport Authority, and I'm also a board member with CMC. So before we begin, I have a few important thank yous. So first, I would like to thank today's forum sponsor, The Ohio State University, and thank you to the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's forum. And we would also like to thank the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for presenting today's live stream. So please help me thank all of those who supported today's forum sponsor. So to get to today's forum. Founded in 1871, the Columbus Dispatch remains the only mainstream daily newspaper in Ohio's capital city. Newspaper leaders have witnessed enormous and dramatic changes over the past decades to how news in America is gathered, shared, and accessed by its readers. Today, we will discuss the future of both Ohio's greatest home newspaper and journalism itself with a multi-generational panel. Please help me welcome today's distinguished speakers, including Edwina Blackwell Clark, Executive Editor of the Columbus Dispatch, Amelia Robinson, Opinion and Community Engagement Editor of the Columbus Dispatch, and our two hosts, Nicole Kraft, Associate Professor with the Ohio State University School of Communication, and Jessica Langer, Editor-in-Chief of the Ohio State University's Lantern Media Group. I look forward to today's conversation.
So do we. Well, Jessica's going to get us started.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess just wanted to say thank you so much for speaking with us. We really appreciate it. I kind of just wanted to start, you've welcomed a lot of young, diverse reporters at the Dispatch. What have they done to really change the Dispatch? What have they contributed and to the Dispatch and the community itself?
I am having trouble hearing your question, so can you speak a little closer?
Yeah, sure. No problem. Yeah, I just want to start with, you guys have welcomed a lot of young reporters to the Dispatch. What have they contributed to the Dispatch and the community?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everybody. It's critically important to have young talent. Okay, we represent an entire community. We represent young, middle class, or middle age, and seniors. And so it's really great to welcome young talent and young reporters, young photographers into the newsroom, and for a couple reasons. First of all, they're probably a little bit more digitally savvy than some of our old, my age individuals. So that's useful. I mean, that melding of young talent and seasoned talent is great for a newsroom. The second reason is it's not really about young specifically, but it's about you've got to build an environment where people can express their opinions. It's one thing to bring them into a newsroom or anybody into a newsroom, but you've got to have structures and ability for people to express those opinions. Because once again, the newspaper is supposed to be representing everybody. So how do we get those opinions? The third thing is it's an opportunity really for training and promotional opportunities. So you've got to always have that continuing, stream of talent. So that's what I would say to that particular question.
And to add on to that a little bit, you also mentioned diversity. Obviously, Columbus is a lot of things, right? The census proved that the diversity, the market is growing because of diversity. So we need to reflect the entire community. That's why, Gannett, USA Today Network has had a big push to diversify our newsrooms because we want to really tell the stories of our actual communities and not just certain segments of the community. We want inclusivity in everything we do because that's important, not just to, reflecting the people, but also the truth, right? We want to tell the truth of what the community actually is.
Yeah. I think that segues kind of perfectly into the question that Jess and I had regarding what you represent. So if we had been sitting up here a year or two ago, we would have seen two very different faces representing the Columbus Dispatch, and Columbia Journalism Review identified the Dispatch as being the whitest newspaper in America at one point. So what does the changing face of the Dispatch, how do you represent the changing face of the Dispatch and the representation in the Columbus community?
Well, I think that, first of all, let me just say that to have a well-functioning business environment, there has to be opportunity for all, okay? There has to be opportunity for women leaders. There has to be opportunity for people of color leaders. There have to be opportunities for younger leaders into an organization, because really that's where you get the mix of, are we representing the community, which is what Amelia just got done talking about. I am honored and thrilled to have this opportunity to lead the Columbus Dispatch. Yes, it may have been, over 100 years, and it doesn't matter to me. What matters now is now, okay? What do we do now? How do I bring my unique perspective to driving news coverage? How does Amelia bring her unique perspective? How does any editor bring their unique perspective to make sure that we are looking at those stories, that we are covering what women are doing, what we're covering, what our minority communities are doing? Yesterday, I was at a naturalization ceremony. There were 150 immigrants who had made that decision to be a U.S. citizen. When I was talking to the federal courts, they were like thousands of our citizens here, or our residents here, are trying to be U.S. citizens here in the Central Ohio, Columbus area. So we have a reporter who's covering immigration. That's important. That community is growing. So when, in terms of what I represent and what I are thinking as it relates to news coverage, we've got to represent. And we have to tell, I like Amelia's thinking, we got to tell their truth. What is their truth? What are the issues? Because historically, that's part of what newspapers do, which is, if it's underserved community, shed light on the issues that are happening, celebrate the successes, talk about the issues that are going on in the community that the broader community needs to know about and needs to care about. So all of those things, specifics that I talked about, really fall into those key things that as a news organization, we did and we should have done 10, 20, 50 years ago, and we will do now and going forward.
And to tell the truth, like, there were opportunities years ago that people who look like me maybe wouldn't have gotten, not just in Columbus. I don't want to talk about Columbus because I don't know that to be true. But there's opportunities in newsrooms that, people like me would not have gotten. So the fact is that organizations, not just in media, but across the board, are looking at ways to better include people who may have been excluded from the conversation before. And that's a very good thing. And these people are just as qualified as anyone else, but they may have been left out of those rooms before. So.
Yeah, you guys spoke about what the role of media organizations are in society. And today, journalism isn't the same what it was years ago. It's constantly evolving. What do you think the role is of journalism today?
Well, let me just say that I don't think journalism is necessarily evolving. What I do think is the methods that we push that information out is evolving. What we do today is what we did 50 years ago in terms of reflecting the community, public service journalism, talking about the issues that are impacting those that are have less opportunity, keeping an eye on our elected officials and government and keep them honest. Those things have not changed. Now, what has changed is that we are pushing that content out in all different types of ways. People want to get their information all different kinds of ways. Let me see a show of hands. How many people in the room have a smartphone? Yes, and we understand what we do with smartphones. We scroll, we get information. We almost use it as a little computer. Come on. So in every mainstream media organization that I know of is aggressively looking at how can we meet readers where they want to be met. We cannot. I'm a long-term newspaper reader. I grew up in a household where we had the newspaper all the time. I've had over 25 years in the industry. So I love print. I love that newspaper. But what I also love and know is that people want information, they want information when they want information, okay? So what I'd like to tell people is the Columbus Dispatch is so much more than that printed paper. It is that, and it has been that for 150 years, and we will continue that strong journalism that you are used to. But you can get information via audio podcasts. You can get information via video. You can get information via newsletters that are pushed to you. You can get information via e-blasts, breaking news alerts that are sent to you. This is something that, in terms of a change that has happened in the media industry, that we have figured out. Oh, we've got to push information. We can't just rely on people to come to our site and just come and read our paper in the morning when it is delivered, because there's very few, if any, afternoon papers anymore. Some of you probably remember days when there was a morning paper and an afternoon. We don't have afternoon papers anymore. So we have to be smart about how we push that information out, and we have to be smart and innovative about how we deliver that information. Okay, so it's more than just words. It's graphics. We're integrating audio clips in stories, all that sort of thing. And we have app. Not only do we have the ColumbusDispatch.com, we've got dispatch apps. And so when you think about that, we're trying to make sure that anybody who wants to consume our news can get it when they want it, and in the format in which they want it. That is the change in terms of how we're pushing that information out. But in terms of the reporting standards, all the same.
Yeah. Speaking on innovation, is there anything that the Dispatch has developed or will be developing to kind of fill that void of the print industry kind of going away as much?
In terms of developing, once again, I would, if you haven't been on dispatch.com, or if you haven't seen our videos, or seen our videos on social media, that's another piece. That's another piece. I was in a discussion last week, and one of the panelists was saying that you shouldn't use social media to consume your information. I think we know, and we can agree that younger people use their news feeds as ways to get information. My perspective about that is, we know they're there. We've got to put our information there. Okay, we've got to put the solid journalism that we're doing, we've got to push that out. So in terms of innovation and different things, our conversation in the newsroom is, how can we do a vertical reel? How can we do a vertical video that we can use on Instagram? Well, we've never had that conversation 10 years ago, clearly, but we're having these different kinds of conversations about how we push that information out.
And I will say, too, we have a whole table of journalists from the Dispatch. And, journalists, let's give them all a round of applause. They do the work every day. I'm not going to talk, but we have some innovative people. Sheridan, one of our reporters, is Wiz on TikTok. And, we have some folks who are doing some great things on Instagram as well. We have Danae, who is doing some really awesome things with marginalized communities. It's just really a different way to look at how you tell stories and where you tell stories. Like when it said, it's not just one platform. It's the whole kit and caboodle, because we want to go where people are. Because we can't expect people to come to us, and we can't expect people to, wait for news to end up on their front step. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess one of the questions that we have, though, you actually still use the term newspaper, and I think a lot of us still use the term newspaper, but the Dispatch news that would come to my doorstep now is 2 days old when it's in print form. When I looked for election results, I'll be frank with you, I didn't go to the Dispatch. I went to other sources that gave me the information more readily.
Well, that was your mistake, because we were first. We were first to say we had everything right. But anyway, go ahead. Dispatch.com had it right first.
Let you finish your question.
That'd be great.
Finish your question, and then I'll respond.
Would you consider the Dispatch to be a daily product now? How do you define kind of the news element of it and how and where we receive news and kind of going off what you mentioned about social media is not going to pay the bills, which is what we found when we all went onto social media and we all gave our news away. We put up websites for free, but that really compromised our ability to pay for news, and I think the shrinking staff of the Dispatch has evidence of that. So help us understand how we marry our expectation for news with the reality of what we're now receiving, where we have to go out and seek it, and it's not necessarily formulated in a package that's easy for us to consume.
Well, I would say for everyone, once again, I love print newspapers, but if you are just looking at the print newspaper, and if you are just relying, as we had decades ago, but you're still just relying on the print newspaper for your breaking news and things like that, that was a great example in terms of election coverage, then I would respectfully suggest that you readjust what your expectations and what everything is. All of the breaking news coverage, that immediate coverage, all of that, it's online. It just is online. Because when you look at print deadlines, once again, we're in a different environment than where we were before. Okay, when we were before, we didn't go to press till midnight, and people's expectations. Once again, I'm driving this from the viewpoint and the need of the audience. In the past, people's expectations were, I'll wait for the 6 o'clock, the 11 o'clock news, and the newspaper in the morning. So let's talk a little bit about the other mediums. TV, 4 o'clock news, sometimes 4:30, I'm in the morning, 5, 6, 6:30, then they're coming back at noon, 4 p.m., substations, 4 p.m., 4:30, 5 o'clock. They've added all of these times, once again, because they are reacting, as we are. We're reacting to when people need and want information. So, once again, I would respectfully, to answer your question, ask you to adjust your expectations. You want the breaking news, you want to hear about election results, you want to know about Ohio State, you want to know the commentary that our fabulous sports staff is doing about Ohio State and the Buckeyes, you got to go online. Yeah, you have to go online.
I need to
it's
add
there.
The, add the Blue Jackets to that since Bailey Johnson's sitting right
okay,
in front of us.
right. All right. But it's there. It's there. It's just in a different, it's there quicker. It's just in a different place.
Well, I do have to ask though, why should we get the Dispatch delivered then? So, that's one of the things that I think we're struggling with when it comes to a print product. And I do actually, in other cities, the print paper still comes in a timely manner in the sense that the news is not 48 hours old. And so I'm curious, what is the plan for the print version since the news is really not as timely as we need it to be?
Right. I don't have any changes to announce as it relates to plan for the print version. Why should you get the print versions? First of all the stories that are in the newspaper are not online. If I'm not saying that everything in ABCD section is online. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the best stuff. I'm saying the most timely stuff. All those things are online. So all those other things are not online. Crosswords are not online. I'm just on the feature section. Comics are not online. TV is not online. So everything is not online. That's the first thing. The second thing in terms of getting the print product is from the advertising perspective, okay? The print vehicle, not just in Columbus, but everywhere, the print newspaper is still an extremely strong advertising vehicle for local advertisers. Okay, think on Sunday, preprints, those sorts of things. I'm just picking a day and I'm picking a specific scenario for advertisers. So that's why you should continue to have a print newspaper, because some of the things that you love may not be online, and still, once again, it's a great venue for local advertisers. So
Great news.
Yeah. In line with the idea of it being spread on social media, the things are coming out so quickly online. Oftentimes, journalism and social media posts can be conflated so much to the point where viewers don't really know the difference at this rate. How can media organizations and the Dispatch kind of combat this issue?
Yeah, you know what, I've said this a couple times, and the role of journalism is so critical today. You know, when you think of the last, I'll just say 10, 15 years, and the rise of partisan viewpoints. Okay, you've had the rise of Fox, the rise of CNN, the rise of MSNBC, not just all that. Then you've got partisan websites and pundits and all of that. Just think how much that has grown. Just think how much that has grown in the last 10, 15 years. There is 100% a need for journalism that is objective and well reported. You cannot get away from that. You cannot be an informed citizen without that. So it does look like it's all mixed together. So what I would ask you to do is when you're looking at content online, you need to ask, where's that coming from? You need to understand the source. You've got to understand the source. Because if it is a partisan view, of course you're going to get whatever side that you're on, you'll get that. If it is just a website, curating content from other places and all that sort of thing, and that happens too, you're going to get that. But you've got to have the objective news information. And there's not many places in Central Ohio and in Columbus specifically that you will get the depth of information about certain things than the Columbus Dispatch. And when I say Columbus Dispatch, I'm talking about all of our platforms.
And really, like, when you think about it, like, I work in the realm of opinion, right? But, what journalists do is not opinion. A lot of the things you see on Twitter and Facebook and all these, like, things are just something somebody's uncle said, right? You want somebody to be able to go out there and vet it to make sure it's actually accurate and is what it is. They say what a lie, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but a lie travels around the social media world 7 times faster than the truth. And this is what, we as citizens have to do is put a stop to that, because we're the only people who can do it. It's not the journalists' responsibility, it's all of our responsibilities to really combat misinformation. And by doing that is to go to reliable sources who are trained professionals, who do have codes. We don't have like any rule books like it's some other professions, but we do have codes as journalists that we have to follow by, that we are taught in journalism school, and I know you're being taught right now, that we all go and strive to do every day. We wouldn't go into journalism if we didn't believe in truth, in the pursuit of truth. Obviously truth is a very fluid thing, but it's a pursuit that's worth it. So.
Yeah, to follow up on that, us at the Lantern, we're always worried. We always think about what's the new thing we can do with engagement. It's always on the top of our mind. And like you said, this news media or the society itself has become partisan, and that's kind of a struggle that we've seen. Do you think there's an issue in objective news outlets like the Dispatch to kind of get that engagement because society may go to certain outlets for that partisan view or things like that?
Well, I might need you to explain a little bit what you mean by engagement, but we have great engagement with our content. Last month, we had 104,000 unique users on dispatch.com. Now this is a new thing as it relates to newsroom. We've got data, we've got dashboards, we've got statistics. We're paying attention to how our content is engaged with, whether it's page views, whether it is they decided to get a subscription based upon the content or something like that. So we are watching engagement, we are paying attention to that, and we are driving some resources towards those topics and things that we know we get lots of engagement, because that indicates that there's great interest in that topic in the community.
Yeah, awesome, thank you.
Well, it was kind of a great segue to you, Amelia, about opinion. Gannett has been shrinking its opinion news space, and I know that the Dispatch is still one of the few that are clinging to providing opinion opportunities for people in the chain. I'm wondering kind of what your view is of this move to contract and in many cases eliminate the opinion elements within the news frame, how you feel about that and kind of where you see the Dispatch going with that in the future.
Well, I think a lot of that is a newspaper by a newspaper too. We do have a lot of, most of our newspapers, our larger newspapers especially, do have vibrant opinion sessions. It's more like an evolution.
Well, there was actually, not to interrupt you, but there actually was there was an article in the New York Times about how Gannett specifically was eliminating eliminating opinion pages. So I do think it's happening.
Yeah, what they
more than
did
we
was
think.
basically they stopped running it every day, and I was going to get to that point right there. Basically, opinion is an evolution of a way we do opinion, because opinion has been divisive. The way we've done it as an industry wrong in a way that furthers the divide that we have in our country, because it pits us against them too much, especially in some of the segments of some of the smaller communities we have, where it's basically like, this is my opportunity to yell at that other person. That's not serving democracy when you give people that platform. We have to be careful about what we allow out there, right? So it's an evolution. Old school editorial boards were very seen anyway in the world as very stuffy and I'm gonna tell you what to do. That's not the approach I take. I allow people to present their points of view and have information shared with the community that can perhaps further people's understanding and perhaps further accomplish the goals we all have, which is a better community. That's the evolution of the opinion section that I'm trying to do right now, which is very complicated because some people don't like what I print or allowed to be run in the paper. But hey, I'm not here to reflect back to you exactly what you want to hear. I'm here to share opinions to further your understanding of other people in our community and what they might think of.
Well, I think you know I'm going to ask you about this then. So
Oh, do
the
it.
editorial that I heard about the most was one from Donald Trump Jr., who was identified as, and I'm quoting, a businessman and author, and businessman and author Donald John Trump Jr. is the eldest child of former President Donald Trump and the late Ivana Trump. And he wrote an opinion piece that was run in the Dispatch criticizing Tim Ryan in his race against J.D. Vance. And I'm just curious, considering how limited and valuable opinion space has become, what is your thought process in running a column like that from someone who's outside of our community, who clearly has a strong bias and is not that I dispute anyone having an opposite viewpoint, but what did that contribute to the understanding of Columbus and the race that he was involving himself in?
Well, you know now where Donald Trump Jr., whose father ran our country for, you can argue, still runs half our country. Now you see where he thinks and what he's coming from and what the alternative is to what you're hearing. We can't just show one side, right? We also endorsed Tim Ryan in the race, right? Which no other, one other newspaper in the state did, because we felt like Tim Ryan best expressed and championed the things that people in the community care about. I get, the same week I got criticism over that. I also got death threats from other people who were upset that I didn't put up an opinion piece that was very transphobic. So we have these things, these conversations that we have about what to run, what to not run, why to run and why not to run it. And it's not really true that the opinion space has shrunk. I run more opinion pieces online than I ever have. So it's not really, yes, we don't have as many days of the week in the print product, but we have more time to really cultivate these opinion pieces that will better inform people's understanding of the world around them. So that's what I'm really striving to do. It's a complicated balance. Donald Trump Jr.'s piece ran with an editor's note that basically said, wink, wink, this is not true. But it's important to still let people know what is being said. It really is. You can't you can't ignore it, because ignoring it is how we get into this situation where you only have one side of the conversation entering your ear. This is where you're talking about with people who only watch Fox News, who only watch CNN, so you don't see what the whole story is.
Yeah. I guess.
Thank you, Tony.
What do you guys think the role of local news is in America today?
Well, the role of local news is, once again, more critical than ever. Because if you think about it, in the past, there were multiple newspapers. Any community that you pick, there were multiple newspapers. So you think about the number of print newspapers that have seen a demise. And so you got to cherish, you got to hold on to local news. Because the bigger newspapers, the more regional newspapers, they're never going to cover a community to the depth that a local newspaper or a local news organization, I'll just say local, I love that term newspaper, but a local news organization is going to cover it. So local news is so critical. Now, hey, you can get some local news by some emails. I'm not going to name them in the market. There are some nonprofit news organizations and other organizations that are trying to do hyper-local news. Hyper-local news. Some of that is done by journalists, and some of it isn't. It is neighbors, it is others coming together and sharing information about what's going on in your neighborhood. That could be considered local news. Now, we can't compete at that level in terms of specifically talking about all the specifics that are happening and think about all the neighborhoods that are in Columbus. But once again, local news is so critical. Yes, the New York Times will parachute in. Yes, CNN or a big story, they'll cover the school strike. They'll come in. You'll see them parachute in and then parachute out. But the local news organizations, such as ours, are there day in and day out, and that's why that is so critical.
Well, I have to ask, since you made the note specifically between people who are journalists and people who are not, your background is primarily in PR, which in the history of journalism and PR have been very separate, and we certainly don't operate in the same way. They're similar, but they're certainly not the same. So how does that influence your PR background, influence the way that you're leading the Dispatch now?
Well, just to make a correction, I have 27 years in newspapers.
And how long, you came most recently from PR.
Exactly.
And how long were you with PR?
I was in PR for 10 years.
Most recently?
And yes,
Okay.
yes, exactly. Right before I came to the Dispatch, I was with the Alzheimer's Association. But my background is in journalism and in print, and so the majority of my experience is in the news organizations. Now, I view this as an opportunity. I've been a news consumer for the last 10 years. I've not been in the industry, but I know the industry. I know from the back of my head. Do it with my eyes closed. I've been in the industry so long. But how I merged those two and brought those two together, I've been a reader. I've been a consumer. I bring that perspective. If anybody should care about local news, it should be because I grew up in the industry. Yet, there were times when I was busy, didn't read the newspaper. There are times when I'm getting sources from all other things, and I was like, I need to go to, what is the Dispatch? What's the Dayton Daily News? What's the New York Times? What is the Wall Street Journal? What are they saying about that? So my opportunity for coming back is I can bring that perspective into the newspaper. Okay, we know people are doing this. They're scanning to get information. Sometimes they just want enough to have a great conversation with somebody. People want to be informed. They want to have a conversation. They want to, I got this and I want to share it. That sort of thing. So that is what has informed and helped me as I'm coming back into the industry. I want you to know, for somebody who grew up in the industry, here I'm still acting like a consumer. So we have to acknowledge the time pressures. We have to acknowledge the great cascade of information that is coming at everybody in all different ways, and we got to cut through that. We got to cut through that and create content that people care about, they want to know about. It makes them feel more informed and all of that. So that's how I have utilized those 10 years and brought that perspective back into the newsroom. But once again, most of my experience has been in journalism. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Where do you see the Dispatch in 20 years, and what kind of impact do you hope it has on the Columbus community?
Man, if I think it's hard to kind of crystal ball 20 years from now. My gosh, but I do know this, and I'm hopeful of this, that we at the Dispatch today will continue to do. I just had this conversation with our leadership. We will continue to put out the best product that we can every day. We will examine those issues. Don't ever forget about the mission of why we're here and what we're trying to accomplish. Now, all this other little stuff, whatever, that's not important. Every day, there are thousands of people in this community that are depending on us, that want to know what's going on. And we got to deliver that. So when I hope 20 years from now that we will continue to be doing that. That, once again, we have changed how we deliver information, but the mission has not changed. The need for strong reporting, the need to look at records, all of those basics and tenets of journalism are still there, and my hope is that 20 years from now, they will still be there, because there will still be a need for the objective journalism and local news for a community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sure. We'll move to questions from our live stream and in-person audiences in just a few minutes. If you have a question, please make your way to the microphone now. If you're watching online, please type your questions into the chat. Before we take audience questions, we have one more final question.
So, you know, I think I look around the room. How many of you are newspaper readers? And I use the term newspaper specifically. Like you like newspapers, you like the touch of them, you feel of them. What? The print, newspapers, that you like newspapers, you like that feeling. You know, it feels like we've lost something. I don't get the dispatch delivered to my door anymore. I read it online. I even read the PDF version. But I do feel like this evolution it's pulled us a little bit away from our community in the sense of we all once read the same thing. We all once had the same reference point in which we could pull information and what was important to our community. How can we stay in that same realm of staying in touch with what's important with our community when our news sources are so disparate, when we're relying on social media and we're listening to a multitude of different podcasts and a multitude of different apps and we're doing all these different pieces? How do we stay as one?
Well, you know, the result of what you're talking about is not being changed because of anything at the dispatch. It's being changed because society, the information sources are crazy, and I mean that's what's changed. I guess what I'm trying to say and what I continue to say is the mission of what the dispatch does has not changed.
Right.
That has not changed. All the things that are absolutely correct, but that's because all these things, a lot of other opportunities to read and gather information have proliferated. It's not because of changes at the dispatch. It's because of all this has happened. And so once again, there are other media in town that cover parts of the community, and you know, everybody plays to their strengths. You know, radio has a strength, TV has a strength, print has a strength. The traditional print has a strength, and I'm saying that strength is still there, and if you want to know what's going on in Columbus, not just at a cursory 30-second level, but you really want to know what's going on in this community, what issues you should care about, what's happening, then you. There's no, it's us. It is us. It really is us. Us being in all different ways, not just print, but all different ways. We're your source. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists today. I'm going to ask some questions on behalf of staff and the live stream audience, and then we'll alternate. Looks like we've got lots of folks lined up here, but I'll kick us off. This morning, NPR ran an article on their website with the following title. Donald Trump, who tried to overturn Biden's legitimate election, launches 2024 bid. So this headline drew applause for its frankness from some online readers, for its frankness about the former president's actions, but others may see this as a headline that is taking sides. From the perspective of American journalism, who is correct in that observation?
Well, let me just answer. The truth does not have sides. Okay, facts are facts. Some people consider opinion facts, but facts are facts based upon our democratic process. Not facts based upon what the media says. It's facts based upon the democratic process, and not just in elected officials, but everything. It is the media. This is where objective journalists come in. It is our responsibility to What did Amelia just say? That when she ran the column for Donald Trump Jr., there was an editor's note there. So I'm talking about objective facts that the majority can agree with based upon democracy, based upon our democracy. So that's how I would answer that question.
Hi, I'm Tricia Strahler, and I am a proud graduate, as you are, from Ohio University with a degree
Go
in public.
Bobcats.
Yeah, both of us.
All three,
Well,
both of them, yeah.
my degree's in public relations, and I just want to set the record straight that there was very little educational emphasis put on public relations. When you got a degree in PR from OU, you got a degree in journalism, period. So, but I wanted to know, because journalism has evolved since those days when Drew Everett, grilled us with our ethics and that kind of thing, to being more entertainment oriented, and people who aren't savvy to how journalism is reported can sometimes fall into the echo chamber and fall into the whole issue of, this all sort of went down the tube when news became entertainment instead of news. So what responsibility do journalists like yourselves have to educate, and myself, to educate people to look for both sides? And what responsibilities do you have as sort of the last bastion for making sure that you are being impartial and you are being fair and you are representing both sides with no wink winks?
Well, I would say this. I would say that in a lot of ways, journalism has failed America. There's a reason that we're in the First Amendment, because we're important to serve democracy. And in a lot of ways, because of what you just said, we've allowed it to be morphed into this entertainment, like this whole, like, you watch election night, it's like a football game, basically, you're watching. It's like, is my team up? And really, that's not what it should be about at all. So it's our responsibility to do what we can to shift that individually. It might be hard, industry-wide, we have to have more of a push towards ethics and like what we actually stand for and and the role we play in democracy. We can never let that slip from our minds. I have taken a lot of punches for being a journalist, but I truly will take them all, because I believe the craft is so important, not just to the local community, but to the nation and to the future. I don't believe we are the last bastion of journalism. I think there's this young lady right here, I just call you a girl, you're not a girl. It's proof that the future is sound, because young folks want to join this fraternity of journalists who are really out there seeking the truth. So we need to deepen our connection to our community, make them know that we are citizens, not just these talking heads, these people who are going to tell them what to do. We are part of the community. We care about the community. We are Americans. We are Americans in the form that we will put our lives for the service of the truth. And that's a weird way to say it. I don't want anybody to think we want to be shot or anything like that. That's weird. But we will stand up for democracy. So.
I'm Carol Looper, a never retired journalist. I get the Columbus Dispatch hard copy every morning, have for more than 50 years, intend to continue. My reasoning is I want to support the reporters and the journalists, because I do believe that they are the people who keep us in touch with the truth. But I have an editorial question. Number one, why are you only having the Dispatch editorial page on a couple of days? And number two, in today's Dispatch, there were 3 editorial comments, 3 letters to the editor, 2 of whom I recognized as regular contributors. How do people get their letters to the editor read and in the paper?
Well, for the second part, you send it to letters@dispatch.com. We look through all the letters we get, and we choose the ones that are rational to print. Some are irrational, and we don't print those, as you can imagine. The second part of your question is, that was a decision that was made Gannett-wide, and we actually have more opinion days than a lot of newspapers. It's not just that they wanted to cut print days or anything like that. It was because we should be focusing on not just allowing like any old thing get in the paper. The best content should get in the paper, and that's what I try to do. Sometimes I do it well and sometimes I do not, but I try to do it every single day, is to present the best content in the paper. And it really has freed me up to do some other things that are important part of my job as well. So it has its upsides and its downsides. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Good afternoon, Mike Hockren with Mid-Ohio Food Collective. And first, a thank you to the Dispatch and especially the opinion section for helping us keep the face of food insecurity in front of this community over the difficult past year. Recently, Edwina, you were talking about journalistic responsibility, and I'm curious, as the sole remaining print newspaper circulator in our capital region and understanding Columbus as the sort of the growth engine of Ohio, what unique responsibilities does the Dispatch have in terms of covering both actions at the State House and issues of statewide concern, and how effectively are we doing that today?
Well, I'm pleased to say that Anthony Shoemaker, our editor over our political and state house coverage, is here. And quite frankly, I think they do an excellent job of talking about the issues, talking about the upcoming legislation that people should pay attention to, I mean, I love their, yes, I'm giving you some kudos, public kudos, but I love their coverage of the races, you know, and help so you understand, you know, the candidates. I think that and most of, if not all that they do, are from a statewide perspective. So you get the context of the impact on the state. You know, during the election season, we talked about how Ohio has gone from a blue state to, and people can either decide if you think it's purple or if you think it's red right now. But explain how that happened, you know. So I think that, most big papers still have some individuals that are covering the State House, but we have the most individuals that are covering the State House and state issues for the state, so.
And two, what we try to do too is make it meaningful for the people who live in Columbus. Like, obviously, people think of the State House as the State House, right? But really, the State House affects us in cities and individuals and townships and everything else. So our goal is to make that real for people. Like the story we worked on with Mid-Ohio Food Collective was basically, why do these decisions that are made by the governor impact local families? It's because the government controls how this money is disseminated to groups. So like we try to make it meaningful, because otherwise it's just looking at like ordinances and not ordinances, but acts and bills. And acts and bills don't really mean anything unless you explain the significance of those bills and why they matter to real people.
Hi, Lucia Lynches from Ione, Ohio. Obviously, you know, there's been sort of this big period of change, and I think one of the biggest things that I struggle with is, oh my gosh, there's so many stories that could be told and, you know, kind of limited funding to actually cover them. You know, you talked about how you have a different, you know, vision for the future. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, maybe more specifically about, you know, what issues in the past do you feel like didn't get enough coverage, and going forward, like what are the issues in the future that you'd really like to hone in on?
So my past is short-lived. I've only been here about 4 months, so I can't talk too much about the past. But I would, you know, once again, we are looking at, we're using research to look at what are those topics that we need to be covering. You know, when we look, you know, when we look at, you'll see growth possibly in crime storytelling. I mean, you see that nationally. True crime podcasts and Dateline NBC and all those sorts of things. How that applies to cases in our area, you'll see that. You'll see in terms of development. I mean, Columbus is booming. So the development, what's happening, business comings and goings, what we need to know about, what's the next intel? You know, what's the impact on traffic? What, you know, we've been writing a lot about what's the impact, affordable housing. How is this region going to solve that issue? So when I look at the future, you know, I'm looking at things like that clearly will have an impact. on the community.
And two, I think, to just add on to that a little bit, I think there's certain communities who have felt a disconnect from the Columbus Dispatch, and I'm not, mitigating the past at all, because I think it's always been a fine newspaper, but we want to deepen our connections to the community at large and let people know that they do have a newspaper that cares about their concerns, a newspaper that is looking out for them and trying to protect not just their bottom line, but also their families and their businesses. We're trying to be that newspaper, and I think Edwina has really kind of hit the ground running with that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you again to our panelists. From the online audience, Chris Cloth says, I love to hold the paper in my hands. That said, WOSU and NPR have become important sources of news for me. How do you see NPR influencing the role of print journalism locally and nationally? And I might add, how do you see, are there other national outlets that are influences for you?
I don't really see NPR influencing anything that I do, anything that we do. They have their lane, and they're great at it, quite frankly, as we are. So I don't see that influencing what we do at the local level. I don't see a relationship there. Yeah, or impact, I should say.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys for being here. I'm Veronica Ferris, and I'm with Mount Carmel Health System. My question to the panel is really around, there's so many organizations competing for opportunities to get stories picked up, and especially in healthcare. So how do organizations really stand out to you to be able to get picked up when we're pitching to you?
Do you work in healthcare?
I do.
Well, I got a reporter for you right here in Health Front.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Obviously, as a Metro newspaper, we get lots of press releases. And we have multiple editors that are looking at those releases and trying to figure out which ones that we will write, which ones have information that maybe fold into a bigger picture story or something like that. I would always suggest that people continue to send us those releases, but don't just send us a release. Email, all of our contact information is online, so you can email us. Our telephone numbers, I think, are there. You can call us. So that personal contact as a follow-up, I think, is really, really important. When I was in PR, going back to my PR days, I had to do that. And I know that that's really critically important because there's so many things that any staff of any news organization is doing that I just think that's important.
And it's also remembering that journalists are people. Like, we all get busy. We all have deadlines we have to meet. But it's also recognizing that the connection that you make as an individual and how to really kind of build that long term is key.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Well,
We-
I hope. Oh, sorry.
I was going to introduce you, Kirsten. So there you go. No,
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you. I need another great introduction.
go right ahead.
Well, actually, this will be a great opportunity for me to thank you because first, I hope everyone found today's forum not just interesting, but also valuable. So thank you to today's forum sponsors, the Ohio State University and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's forum, as well as the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's live stream as well. So just so you know, we'll be taking a break next week for the Thanksgiving holiday, but we'll be back on November 30th for another forum, and that one is titled From Whitewater to Mar-a-Lago, How High-Profile Investigations Really Work. So I would like to thank our speakers today, Edwina Blackwell Clark, Amelia Robinson, and our hosts, Nicole Kraft and Jessica Langer. Thank you so much. And enjoy the rest of your day.